We're here checking in with Mr. ESPN sports analyst Chris Broussard, man. Thanks for taking the time to kick it with us, man.
Hey, man, my pleasure. I enjoy what y'all do.
And this is the real Chris Broussard, 2 S's, not 1.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time, man. So we'll jump straight in it. One thing that we've seen that has been really interesting to see, especially over the last few years, where we're seeing on one side you're seeing faith bubble up on the music side, especially with the rise of Christian hip hop, but you're also seeing faith bubbling up and coming to the forefront in sports. What's on the sports side first? What's it been like seeing it from your side of the table, where you've seen the Tebow mania and Jeremy Lin, and even in hockey with Tim Thomas and some of the others, where faith has kind of come up front. What's that been like, covering that and just dealing with the atmosphere of that?
For me, as a Christian, I like to see it. I like to see athletes speak out, because I know from personal experience that they can impact the people who are watching them. Before I was a Christian, really when I was being convicted by the Lord that I needed to be saved, looking at Evander Holyfield, Charlie Ward, reading stories about them being Christians impacted me and was a part of my journey to the Lord. So I know that a Tim Tebow or a Jeremy Lin or Robert Griffin III or any of these guys that name the name of Christ, they're influencing youth or adults, but men and women who kind of look up to them. So I like to see it. I also think it's interesting that the two most miraculous, if you will, stories in sports this past year were Tim Tebow, and Jeremy Lin. And both are outspoken Christians. So I kind of look at it like, God stepped into the realm of the religion of America, which is sports, particularly among men. And he shined his light on these two stories. And hopefully, and I believe it did, hopefully impact a lot of people out there.
Do you think seeing stuff like that, do you think that's pushed the conversation about faith in America forward, set it back, or just made it what it was?
Yeah, personally, I think it is what it is. I don't think that there's been more conversation about faith. I wish there would be, but I really don't think that in general, in America, we're talking more about faith. In fact, I'm pretty confident in saying that I think the culture continues to move away from the things of God at a pretty rapid pace. And hopefully we can stop it, but I think that's the way it's going right now.
Now with those guys, especially with a guy like Tim Thomas for the Bruins, Tim Tebow and Jeremy Lin, they got kind of polarizing responses, both for their faith and for their play. Do you think that the responses about their play became so polarizing because the conversation about faith was so polarizing? Or
I don't think, in the case of Jeremy Lin, I don't think it had much to do with his faith. I think it was because a lot of people felt he was overhyped. And to be honest, if he hadn't, being the person that lives in the greater New York City area, and having covered the New York Knicks and been a part of the New York media, it was overhyped. I mean, what he did was spectacular, but if he had done that in Milwaukee or Sacramento, it wouldn't have been as big of a deal. And so the fact that it took place in New York, it was overhyped. There were a lot of players, and still are a lot of players in the league, who feel like, look, we were doing that for years. This guy comes along and does it for a couple of months, and he's getting more hype than we ever got. So he's going to have a bullseye on his chest this season, because a lot of people felt, he got paid more than them, or than they certainly would have got for doing something that they've been doing for years, whereas he did it for a couple of months. So I don't think Jeremy Lin's situation, I think, a lot of people too think they're not sure about how good he is. I'm not sure. I think he's a good, solid player. I don't think he's going to be a star. And I think so you have people on the one hand who really think he's a bona fide star, and then you have other people who think he may be a backup or just a decent average starter. So I think there's a lot of reasons beyond his faith to why he was so polarizing. I don't think his faith had much to do with it. As far as Tim Tebow, I think a good amount of it is because of his faith. But at the same time, I think, I don't know if it's his faith or not, but he's a wildly popular guy. I mean, even the people that don't like his game and don't think he's a very good quarterback admire him and, you know, what he stands for and the way he carries himself, how great of a leader he is. So I would say with him as well, the majority of the polarization with Tebow was also because of his game. You know, you got those who think he's just a winner and he's just a football player and, you know, just let him do his thing. And there are those who say he's not a traditional quarterback, can't really throw the ball. If he wasn't so popular, then he wouldn't have even gotten a chance to be a quarterback in the NFL. So, you know, I think, and then there's some African Americans that think, you know, black quarterbacks who were like him, who really weren't passers, mainly runners, they never even got the chance. You know, whether it was a Tony Rice at Notre Dame or a Charlie Ward at Florida State. Yeah, so I think that's a whole nother reason why he's a polarizing guy.
Charlie Ward played NBA.
Yeah, he didn't even play for a while.
Now, kind of shifting a little bit. I mean, you've seen your tweets a bit. We see you. I've seen you talk about it on TV. I've seen you tweet about your love for hip hop. And when you talk about hip hop, you're not talking about Nas or Ye or nobody. You're talking about Lecrae. You're talking about Bizzle. You're talking about Tedashii. You're talking about Christian believers. Did I see you mention Dre? I think I saw you mention Dre Murray. And
big fan of Dre Murray.
Shout out to Dre. Dre's a good dude. Make great music too. When did that, like, what was your introduction to Christian hip hop? And
well, I got saved my senior year in college, which was 1989. So I'm dating myself. Were you even born?
I was. I'm 32.
Okay.
I was born.
All right. So yeah. So I grew up, you know, on hip hop. It was my favorite form of music, really, from the moment I first heard it. Rapper's Delight. And I used to write rhymes when I was 9 years old. I started writing rhymes and, you know, just was very much into hip hop. Did, you know, rapped and stuff in high school and college. Used to rap on campus, DJ and all that. And at that time, to be honest, hip hop really, there was some that was really vile. You know, you had the 2 Live Crew. I'm talking about before they even got very popular, but you know, their stuff was kind of out there. But it was a couple of other groups. But for the most part, you know, Run DMC, you know, LL Cool J, a lot of his stuff. You know, Eric B. and Rakim, Public Enemy, KRS-One. You know, a lot of it wasn't negative at all. You know, it wasn't a lot of cursing in it even at that time. But when I got saved, you know, I was still listening to secular hip hop. But as time went on, and the cursing started getting more into it and the content started getting a little more pornographic, if you will, I started realizing that I didn't want to listen to it, you know. So I was at a church in Cleveland, Ohio, and the pastor's son there told me about this. They have Christian hip hop. And before I say that, I should say, in being that I used to rap on campus, my senior year, I actually did a Christian rap on campus. And it was called How You Like Me Now. You know, like, you loved me when I was, like, in the world, but how you like me now that I'm saved. And it was actually a big hit on campus. Everybody liked it. You know, the crowd was hyped and stuff. So, so then for me, you know, I didn't even think of it as a Christian rap, because when I was coming up, hip-hop wasn't, you could rap about anything. There was all types of content out there, and it really didn't matter. You know, like I said, the groups I mentioned, most of them had different types of things they rapped about, and they still got radio play. And rap was, you know, it was kind of, I'd say it was more real, I guess, because, you know, whatever type of person you were, where Chuck D with Public Enemy, they were about, you know, black issues and black empowerment, and KRS-One was, you know, he was kind of about that stuff too, or about, you know, the South Bronx, and you know, Rakim was into his Islam, and 5%er, and you know, LL was in the girls, and Run DMC, you know, they did a lot of different things they rapped about. So I looked at hip hop as what was important, what was critical to it was the art form. You know, could you rhyme, and were your beats nice, and your DJ and all that, the scratching, the mixing. So I felt like if there are rappers who are saved, then they'll naturally rap about the Lord and about biblical principles. You know, I never looked at it as a big deal that, you know, they're rapping about that, because I felt you could rap about anything. So my pastor's son told me about this, you know, you could get Christian hip hop CDs at, or at tapes, cassettes at that time, at Christian bookstores. So I went to some Christian bookstores, and that's when I first was exposed to Christian hip hop. I think the first Christian hip hop CD or cassette that I had was SFC, Soldiers for Christ.
Wow.
You ever heard of them? Yeah, and Listen Up was their first one. They became one of my favorite groups. But it's funny because back then, man, it would be one good Christian hip hop album to come out every 9 to 10 months, you know, and I would just bump that one for 9 to 10 months, you know? And I'm telling you, Christian hip hop heads don't know how good they have it right now. You know, that there's so much. I mean, there's stuff coming out every few weeks, good stuff, legitimate stuff. You had a decent amount of Christian hip hop out at that time, decent, not a lot, but some of it was just corny, some of it just wasn't good, the skills weren't good. You had groups like SFC, Freedom of Soul, T-Bone, Preachers in Disguise, PID. Dynamic Twins were okay.
Were you an ETW fan?
They had like maybe their third or fourth album. At that point, I thought they became pretty good. Yep. I wasn't in their early stuff, but Idle King was really good. So you had a handful of groups, you know, and then it kind of, you know, it just got bigger and bigger. And I'm thankful for it, because, like I said, I loved hip hop, and I felt for me to grow, I just didn't want to listen to really the secular hip hop that was being played. And I like choir music and, you know, church music and stuff like that. But, you know, I was into hip hop, and to be able to listen to some hip hop that was edifying or didn't contradict my biblical values, you know, I wouldn't have to worry about what the content was. That was really, you know, good for me and helped me grow, and even helped my boldness, I would say. You know, hip hop is a very bold art form. I think that's one of the strengths of it. It can be used for good or bad, but that is one of the strengths of it. And so, you know, as time's gone on, I've just gotten more, you know, it's gotten better and better. And I like all the different genres of Christian hip hop. You know, you have some that's overtly theological. You have some that's really, you know, it's all not, I wouldn't say, for lack of a better phrase, almost secular, but, you know, you have Christ interspersed here and there. And I like all of it, you know. So I've, you know, been listening to Christian hip hop for 20 years or so, and it's come a long way. It's interesting to me because it's been, I think there's times when you get a new Christian rapper who, you know, was in the world or something, and they come out and they think they're gonna be the ones to push Christian hip hop to the secular, mainstream, and it doesn't really happen. I don't think it's because the skills aren't good. Personally, I think Christian hip hop for the most part is on par with secular hip hop. You know, there may be an artist or two in secular hip hop who nobody's touching, whether it's Christian or secular. You know, but I think for the most part, it's just as good. You know, in terms of the art form. So I just think that the world isn't. They may hear it and like it and think it's good, but it's hard for them to just vibe to it consistently. Just like I may hear some secular hip hop and say, yo, man, that's dope. That dude got skills. beats dope, but I can't really vibe to it. You know, I can't vibe to it constantly because it's just not in agreement with my spirit.
What's the reaction been among athletes with Christian hip hop? Are you seeing where athletes are getting like really behind? Well, at least some of them getting behind Christian hip hop, supporting Christian hip hop, listening to it.
Yeah, you know, I used to years ago when I was covering a team in the NBA like the Knicks. I would make compilations myself, you know, and like 15 songs on the CD I burn and give it to some players, you know, and just see what they thought. You know, these were guys I might see once or twice a season, but just give it to them and see what they thought. And so I was doing that from the time I started covering the NBA in 1996. And so a lot of guys liked it. You know, they said it was good stuff. They liked it. Thanked me for giving it to them. But in general, you know, I haven't talked to a lot of athletes about the Christian hip hop lately because I'm not traveling as much. I'm not as many games as I used to be. But I've seen like guys like Steph Curry, and you know, I've gotten behind it, and Jeremy Lin, like you mentioned, Lecrae. So hopefully, you know, I'm sure it's infiltrating, you know, the league to some degree. We got to do a better job, you know, with getting it out to the players and to the world. But you know, I think it's gotten respect. It's gotten a lot more respect now. It's not viewed as corny anymore, and I think that's a good thing.
That's it, yeah. Because I mean, baseball, you got baseball players coming out. That's their walk-up song. You know, they have Lecrae or Tadashi.
Okay, good.
You see that. So I was just seeing what it was like in you know, basketball or NFL.
Yeah.
Well,
that's good.
Chris Broussard, thanks for the time.
All right, my man.
Thanks for kicking it with us here at Rapzilla.